Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bobble Pod. On this episode, we're going to be talking about acquisition and retention strategies with Casey Parram, who is our guest today. So, hello, Casey.
Pleasure to be here.
Casey's made a trip up from London today, so he finally got his visa to get up to the north of England. So, congratulations on that. Before I begin, as always, to anybody who's watching or listening, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe if you're listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello YouTube, don't forget to click on the notification and the subscription button for our episodes that come out weekly. So, Casey, welcome to Bobble Pod. Welcome to Leeds.
Yes. To be fair, I've spent quite a lot of time in Leeds. I'm going to admit it's my second favourite city.
We like to hear that. We definitely like to hear that. You've come up specifically just for this, so we appreciate the time and effort you've taken to come up today. So for our listeners, briefly explain who you are and your journey today.
Yeah, sure. So as Manny said, my name's Casey Parram. I have been working with online businesses for over a decade now, in various different roles such as investor, advisor, CMO. Essentially my recent transition has been to focusing on business strategy, working specifically with solopreneurs, and also coaching online business owners. Prior to that, I was CMO to an e-commerce brand that we scaled to 8 figures, been fractional CMO to several others. That kind of explains my career history.
CMO, for anyone who doesn't know, is Chief Marketing Officer. And
Yep.
We've met last year now through mutual connection of ours in Dubai. And we've been in contact since then. And you introduced me to, do you want to tell me the name of the book?
It was 100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy.
Yeah. I've mentioned this on my podcast, a great book. And we talked about when we first had our catch up, the different kind of like ad messaging and how to develop it. And you actually sent me a digital a copy of it, and then ended up buying the physical copy to give some to my team members and stuff, which was really, really good. So it goes to show the experience you actually have. So we're talking about acquisition and retention strategies, which seems to be a key area of where your expertise lies, but also it's a great topic to help educate our listeners and viewers. So for them, please explain what acquisition and retention strategies are.
Yeah, sure. An acquisition strategy is basically the process of how your company acquires a customer, and a retention strategy is how you retain them. So that would be, the repeat purchase rate, keeping them engaged and essentially keeping them loyal. For me, there's only 2 ways you can really grow a business. It's either how many people you sell to or how many things you sell to one person. So understanding your business model will be entirely dependent of which one of those areas should be your primary focus.
I always say this. I feel like businesses miss the trick. I feel like a lot of businesses focus too much on acquisition and not enough on retention. It's a bit like the whole brand versus performance debate. I've said this a few times on the last few podcasts, where it should be brand and performance. It should be acquisition and retention strategies, which is why the podcast called Acquisition and Retention Strategies, not one or the other. Your existing clients are just as important because they help keep the money flowing in to allow you to invest into new acquisition. And it varies because a lot of your experience is obviously e-commerce with this, and it can be applied to B2B. So just explain, what impact did this have in e-commerce?
So e-commerce is pretty straightforward in terms of the business model itself, selling products to people via the internet. My specific experience was actually accidentally starting a fashion brand. And that led to some challenges that, I wasn't really aware of prior to going into that scenario. So I know fast fashion is kind of like a bit of a gray area in terms of people don't really like it. But if you understand the dynamics of the actual business model, you have to acquire a customer for a certain cost, but the way that you actually make profit is through your retention strategy. So let's take, for example, Boohoo. They are able to sell a product at X price and they have great market share through that. But how they actually make their money is through selling more products to that same person. So the retention side of things of that type of business model is where you actually make your profit. Especially where acquiring customers is extremely competitive and expensive now. You have really large brands who can spend a lot of money to acquire a customer, knowing that the lifetime value of that customer they'll be able to still make profit even if they lose money on the first transaction. So in the context of e-commerce, you can simplify that model just through drop shipping, where you completely alleviate the fulfillment side of that business. But yeah, unless you kind of understand that dynamic between acquisition and retention, it makes it really, really difficult to understand how you can profit through acquiring customers.
Now, most of our listeners aren't the boohoos of the world. It tends to be, people like yourself who set up a fashion brand themselves, small companies. How can they use acquisition and retention strategies, and what should they use them for, really?
I think to what you said earlier, it's not a problem to be solved. It's more of a dynamic to be managed. So how I like to do it is that you have different phases throughout your business. Initially, you will need to focus on acquisition for proof. Your main focus should be acquiring customers, so you actually get proof that you've got a viable business model. Secondly to that, you then need to focus on retention, because what that allows you to do is start to generate some profit. So rather than focusing on acquiring new customers, use the customers that you have because they're easier to sell to. And that's what allows you to generate more profits. Once you've actually understand how that dynamic works, you then revert back to acquisition, because that's when you can go into a growth phase. You can grow knowing that you're able to profit from the customers that you already have. And then as you inevitably grow, you'll encounter issues with fulfillment, whatever your business model is. That's when you'll probably need to revert back to retention and use the new money that you've created to start systemizing and processing your business. So ultimately, I definitely tend to advise people to alternate between the two, rather than seeing it as I've solved my acquisition thing or I've solved my retention thing. It's definitely a dynamic that you have to alternate between.
Yeah, when we bring digital marketing into this, because we are a digital marketing podcast, is acquisition. I feel like a lot of digital marketing efforts, channels, PPC, paid social, all goes towards acquisition. There's certain tactics like retargeting elements that work as more like, retention strategies, but a lot of that's still used to support acquisition. So have you encountered anything through digital marketing where you've used specific channels or techniques to focus on acquisition and retention, and what should businesses do?
So my approach to this has always been focus on one channel and master that before you start worrying about diversification. In terms of your ability to acquire a customer, pick one channel, and I advise people to focus on what your unique skill set is and also the type of business that you have. So let's use two different examples. For a fashion brand, going for content marketing probably isn't going to be the greatest lever that you can pull, because you need to be showcasing your product and people want to see what it's like on other people. And there's a lot more like product benefits and problem solution type dynamics that can be better advertised through an alternative route. But let's say for me personally, I'm not the most confident when it comes to going on camera or stuff like that. So I use content marketing as kind of like my go-to acquisition strategy. So I think it really depends on what your unique skill set is and the type of business that you're in. With regards to the e-commerce brand, it was definitely like paid media was just the main channel that we really sort of dove into and focused on primarily. And you're able to achieve great scale just through mastering your ability to advertise on one particular channel. For us, it was Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, you've got to pick the right channel for you. Not to say all channels are going to work, but it's like you said, master each channel as best as you can. And a lot of this is e-commerce, but it works just as importantly for B2B. We're a service-based agency. We focus on our existing clients as much as we do as pitching to new clients. We have to go out and offer free audits and strategies to be able to get in front of customers, to be able to showcase what we can do, but we're never guaranteed to win it. However, that doesn't mean we just focus on new clients. We have to make sure we're delivering for our existing clients, because if they drop off in droves, then our retention rate isn't good. And that's not a positive thing for an agency. So we need to have a high retention rate, which is what we do have, by the way. So it's good. But that has to be part of the case of what we need to push out. So it works just as well. So if you're thinking, well, this is all e-commerce, no, remember it, B2B, it works just as well. You've now adapted your approach, Casey, haven't you now? So a lot of your experience was e-commerce, CMO, doing a lot of these acquisition retention strategies, where you now use this method for what we call solopreneurs. So firstly, what is a solopreneur? What would you say is a solopreneur for anyone listening?
I mean, my definition of a solopreneur is essentially it's someone who works for themselves. It's a one-person team. I believe moving forward that a lot of skill sets will probably be owned by solopreneurs. You'll have one person who is uniquely positioned to do something that previously was only reserved for large teams. So yeah, by definition, a solopreneur is kind of like a one-person business.
What about someone like, because my understanding was it was like someone who runs a company by themselves. I agree it could be an individual, but then would you say that's a freelancer or a contractor? I always thought a solopreneur was more, it's good to get your understanding, because to me it was always like someone who ran a small agency or small business by themselves. They are the only owner, they only a director, not as a group of people or a board of directors or something.
I mean, people have like varying definitions of stuff, but I think in this kind of new era of entrepreneurs, you have a lot of people where they don't have ambitions to build large teams or partner with people or manage a huge team. A large reason for my own transition into solopreneurship was I could see the trajectory that my career was going. And I was like, I don't want to manage large teams. I don't want to deal with corporate BS. I really much want to optimize my life for the things that I enjoy, and work with people I enjoy and work on projects that I enjoy. And that degree of freedom was something that I wholeheartedly just wanted to optimize for.
And is that why you work with just them?
Yeah. I mean, it's, as a coach, essentially, the reason that you tend to be in that position in the first place is that you've achieved something that other people want. And I had this overhanging fear personally that I had to kind of reach the summit of the mountain before I could preach to people behind me. And then I had a really good conversation with a coach of mine, and he was like, you're going to be so far removed that people aren't going to hear. And secondly, why do you wait? I came to the realization that progress is valuable. You don't have to be perfect. So for me, having gone through that journey and that transition myself, I feel very well equipped to kind of help people who are a bit further behind me on that journey get to where they need to be, having used the experiences that I've had, so they kind of get the lesson without the scar.
I always say, if you're out there and you're listening and you need support, you need guidance or a coach, someone put it in this way, is you should have there's 3 levels. You should have someone above you who's been there and done it to advise you. You should have someone at the same level as you, so another business owner. Doesn't have to be the same field, but it's going through the same process as you as building a company. And then eventually you should have someone below you where you're eventually you're their mentor. So, you can then put into practice what you've learned from your mentor, what you've learned by working with others at the same level. So you can actually show that you understand it and have been able to put into place. I don't, and no offense if you listen to this, if you're part of a company like Action Coach and you've never run a business or worked in this industry, and I get a lot of it on LinkedIn, I don't want you coaching me. What value are you going to provide to me? My mentors are people who have set up and run and sold big agencies. They're where I'm going to get the value of being able to deal with, how did you deal with growth? How did you deal with all these issues? How did you deal with all this cash flow? How did you chase payments? How did you deal with HR? How did you deal with this legal stuff? How did you deal with expansion to other offices? They're the ones that can say, well, this is how we did it. These are the challenges you got to be okay. So they're better equipped to help answer the questions. So yeah, I value that as a...
Yeah, I think for me, I had my own insecurities in and around that, and the titles of coaches and mentors and strategists, etc. But I think kind of a large part of it is simply just sharing what's worked for me. And I self-confess that I don't know everything, but I can share what's worked, and I can share things from my unique experience and my unique perspective. And I think really kind of championing my personal skill set of being able to approach problems in a very black and white way, and see them for exactly what they are, and knowing what advice to give people based on their specific requirements.
So when you're working with a solopreneur, and you're talking about acquisition and retention strategies, what are the questions they coming up with you with? So what let's say I'm a solopreneur and I'm running a small fashion brand. I'm by myself, right, and got a team doing it all out of my house through a Shopify website. I got questions. What would you expect? What are the type of questions you would expect me to ask of you?
I think for most people, the big issue they have is overwhelm, just because they feel like there is so much they should be doing. You know that you should be on Facebook. You feel like you should be on TikTok. You feel like you should be on Google. And there's just this overwhelm of information. Everyone's got some sort of strategy that they're advising or some sort of offer that they're promising. And ultimately, those people's jobs are to make everything look easy. The types of questions that I get is like, okay, I understand it, but what does it specifically look like? So for me personally, how I frame it is that business owners are only ever stuck for one of three reasons. They don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it, or they don't know why they should even do it in the first place. For me, I have an entrepreneur first approach, business second. I want to know, like, what's your motivation? What do you actually want out of the business? And then we optimize building the business for that, because I think most people don't ever ask those questions of themselves. Understanding what you need to do. Again, there is so much information out there online, but for someone who can understand the context of where you are specifically in your business, the resources you have, when you first get started, should you be spending money on SEO? Probably not, because you're not going to see the direct measurable results that's going to build consistency into your business. So it's understanding the context of the business and then the specifics of how, which I feel that's the part that's really skipped over. I can say to loads of people, you need to increase your referrals. Okay, well, how do I do that specifically? What does that look like? And for me, it would be a case of, okay, here's the tool, here's the template, here's where you introduce it into the conversation, here's how you do it, and here's how you measure it. It's not the theory, because what I found theory and strategy is the easy part. The implementation is what makes the difference. And those type of questions are usually dialed down to, okay, I get it, I understand it, but how do I actually do it? And that's where I really try and provide that specific value.
I just want to say SEO is still very, very important for anyone who's watching, not just neglect it. But I agree with that. There are challenges you need to obviously focus on. There are challenges going to be about, but that's the key thing. You could say by anyone who's listening and watching this podcast that actually I state the obvious, but I can't go into too much detail. I wish I could visualize in a way how to do. So our previous podcast, for example, is how to do Google Ads audit. You'll be aware of this with your experience. And I broke it down different steps and I tried to go into as much detail into elements. But ultimately, unless you turn up to like a seminar where someone's showcasing how to do it, that's how it happens. And that's the value essentially you're providing. It's like, you know what you need to do, but you just don't know how to do it. Your Google Ads isn't performing, but you need to look into it. So how do you do that? Well, go get an audit, right? Make sure you know what an audit looks like. Tell the person who's doing the audit why you want the audit done, what you want to achieve. Getting into the understanding of it, I think that's always the best way, because if you're building to sell, you should be always looking at your company on always every quarter, like, would I buy this company? So when I look at Bobble Digital, even though I'm trying to build to sell, that is the ultimate goal. However, I'm like a hybrid mind. Sometimes I change. I think maybe I'll build a dynasty instead around the brand Bobble. But the goal is, because my health, I had a kidney transplant. I don't know how long I'm going to have this health is. I'd like to get to an age where I'm about 40, where I have some level of comfortability, but that means selling a big chunk of the agency and be able to take a step back and being able to actually enjoy the leisures of life from my hard work. Fair enough. But that's a goal. That's an entrepreneur's mind, as you just said, in terms of putting that in place and what you want to do. But then I have to look at, would I buy my agency as it is right now? And when I look at it right now, to be transparent, no, I wouldn't. But I know I'm working on getting it to the level where I can say, well, actually, by 2025, I would buy this agency. That doesn't mean I'm going to sell. I know what value I want to sell at. For me to have that, you always have a number in mind. So that's the kind of like value you do. What other kind of like insights, templates would you like give to a solopreneur based on obviously acquisition retention strategies?
I think for me, as I said earlier, you need to alternate between acquisition and retention. Adding consistency and predictability into your business as early as possible is like one of the greatest gifts I can give someone, because when you first start a business, you have the kind of motivation of, yes, you want to make money, but you don't realize that you're going to have to deal with the inconsistencies and fluctuations, and that will really affect your performance and your ability to make decisions. It's just creating unnecessary overwhelm and anxiety. So as I said earlier, focusing on one channel and really prioritizing that. For me, I would definitely steer towards Facebook, purely because it's just the most robust and the most predictable. Focusing on one channel and mastering that is the best way to add consistency into your business. Moving on to your retention strategy, email is still a great tool. And if you're not sending emails, you absolutely should. purely just because, again, the quicker you can install that consistency and stability from a financial perspective into your business, once you have capital at your disposal, because you're able to create controllable, measurable income and profit, you can then decide where you want to allocate those resources, your time, your effort, your money. When you've actually got that fund and you then decide to test elsewhere, you can do it without the risk of, if this doesn't work, it's really going to screw over my business. So yeah, just really add that consistency in as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that's, we focus a lot of e-commerce as a bit of a sector, and obviously solopreneurs. But remember, if you are B2B, it's the same. Focus on what works and what doesn't work. Acquisition is all good, but retention is it. And I always say this is, you can lead a horse to water, but it's up to the horse to drink. We can get you the leads. It's up to you and your internal systems and techniques and emails or HubSpot or CRM system or however you nurture that lead to do it. Now, we do marketing showcase events where we go out and get the leads, but then it's still on me to work with my BD and my sales team to get those meetings booked in, to get those audits and strategies done, to put in our proposition and then still get it over the line. So remember, don't forget that element to it. So if it's e-commerce, it's if you have got the customer over the line and made one purchase, is how do you get them to buy 2, 3, 4 purchases? How do you get them to become a brand ambassador for you? And it all comes down to stuff like email, giving them offers, incentives to come back and buy, telling them of new products that they might be interested in based on their historical purchase. Amazon is the biggest example of this. It's literally knows everything about you, even knows what you might be considering buying, because that's what it tailors its homepage to when you go in on the app or if you go on a website. It already knows what you've bought historically, it already knows what you're interested in, and then it'll show you products based on that. It's as simple as that. I always finish with one question for all our guests, and that question is, if there's one thing the audience, the listeners, should take away from this podcast, what should that be and why?
I thought a lot about this question. I think for me, it's be really intentional about the type of business you build. Going to what you said earlier about your future vision for potentially selling Bobble, there's obviously something that's happened in your life that's kind of led you to try and build your business in that way. And I feel so many people live their life by default as opposed to design. And that's reflected in the way they carry themselves in their business and stuff. When you have those tough conversations and you actually sit and reflect on what you actually want, that will start to impact the decisions that you make for your business. So I think really be intentional about what it is that you want. And particularly when it comes to like acquisition and retention, if you are in a real stage of looking and positioning yourself to sell your business, you're probably going to double down on your retention and make yourself as profitable as possible. Because then that means when it comes to someone potentially acquiring you, they can literally add fuel to the fire, knowing that you've already built those systems and processes and you have the ability to really maximize the customers that you do acquire. So yeah, I think having that tough conversation with yourself about what it is that you actually want, what does success look like for you, and then optimizing everything for that.
Actually, that's great advice. If I was going to add one thing, I'd be like, especially to B2B and e-commerce companies, is retention is just as important as acquisition. And a lot of emphasis then puts on digital marketing agencies and specialists that we need customers. But when you do get the customers, keep those customers so you have less reliant on needing new customers. It's like, I always look at like the influencers of today, the really good ones like KSI and Logan Paul, Smart. They built a fan base and they continue to build a fan base, but they don't go out just to build a fan base now. What they do is they're building their brand to their existing fan base because they're the ones that continue to buy. They're the ones that are buying the tickets to watch them fight. They're the ones that are buying, the tickets to see their activities. They're the ones buying the Prime drinks and making it very, very valuable. There's a famous quote that says, would you rather have, I think it was rather have, £5 million or 5 million loyal friends. And I would say I'd rather have 5 million loyal friends, because if they're loyal friends, if I ask £5 from every single one of them, do the maths. If I run for president or prime minister, I'd have 5 million voters. If I set up a brand and an e-commerce company, I'd ask all my friends to buy a product, all that kind of stuff. And that is essentially the value of retention strategies over acquisition. So my viewpoint is don't neglect retention. because that's what's going to make it. And that's what's going to make Bobble valuable in the future is someone coming in and seeing how long are these clients been at Bobble Digital? What is the average lifespan? Clients do move on, happens all the time for different reasons, economical, especially recently we hear a lot of stuff about what's happening with service-based companies of struggling to keep on to clients because everybody wants more value for money, but that's where in the long run they want to see the value of it. So thank you, Casey, for joining us.
Yeah,
it's been an absolute pleasure. You've come a long way, and I feel it's been a really, really insightful and useful talk for our listeners and our viewers today. If you like that and you wanted to keep listening to more information, more insights like that, to more guests, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell notification. Don't forget to use the at handles at Bobble Digital. If you want to tag us into anything, use the hashtags Mr. Bobble, hashtag Ask Bobble, or hashtag BobblePod. Thank you, Casey, for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening, and we'll catch you up on the next episode.